I'm actually pretty happy in hindsight that I made my love and appreciation of classic Mega Man one of the first things I established on my channel. I'm not happy with that review itself anymore, if only for the footage quality I insisted on and my vocal performance. In terms of writing, there's not a whole lot I could complain about except maybe the outline ramble, which I could have worded much better. I felt like this towards that review for a while now, but again, I'm glad I made it in hindsight, because it allows me to see something like Street Fighter Cross Mega Man, and then decide that, hey, that looks cool, I should review it, without needing to establish context for how I feel about the series. As for the Street Fighter end of things, it was always a series that I have respected, and since my Tekken Bloodline review where I said I didn't know much about it, I've gotten a lot more experience with the series due to the 30th anniversary collection. This is a great collection with 5 different versions of Street Fighter 2, only what's needed. All of that is to say, I'm pretty keen on a crossover between the two existing in the style of classic Mega Man game. Sounds really cool actually. Better yet, the game is free to download from Capcom's website made to distribute it. I have a link to pick your region for the download and description for those interested. This game actually started development as a fan game that was shown to a Capcom employee who then showed it to more employees, later leading to them backing the project and releasing it on their website. There is no doubt in my mind that they did this just to have anything to celebrate Mega Man's 25th anniversary. This released in 2012 after Mega Man 10. A 2-year gap doesn't sound that bad, in fact that was the gap between 9 and 10, although given that 11 wouldn't be released until 2018, I feel like at this point they really had no plan for the future of the series. Street Fighter was a far more active franchise at the time, with Street Fighter 4 still getting updated releases at this point, and Street Fighter Cross Tekken releasing in 2012 as well. Why was this series given 2 crossovers with similar titling schemes for this anniversary? Now, just as with any crossover, you want to know the compelling story of how these two universes collide. Well, the game itself has no story, but the README file does, and even it can't cobble together a reason for these two series coming together. Mega Man, after years of fighting against Robot Masters, decides to take his anniversary off and relax. Ryu and friends being Ryu, Rolento, Rose, Urien, Blanca, Chun-Li, Dhalsim, and C. Viper find out and decide that they want to fight him for their anniversary. So these clowns just decide to bully the less successful franchise. Wow. I also guess that Bison has some evil plan going on at the same time. It's never mentioned though, so for all I know, Mega Man decided to go beat him up too. He wants nothing to do with this series anymore. I guess that's why he skipped Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite and just let X take his place instead. Upon opening the game, we get a cute little animation with Blanca to celebrate both anniversaries, and then the title screen. In the options, not only is there total key configuration, but also the option to set up a controller. This is my preferred way to play classic Mega Man, of course I went with it. There are also a variety of screen size options. The two major ones are full screen 1 and 2. For both playthroughs I did for this review, I used full screen 1 option for the convenience of filling the screen, granted with bars on the side. This footage here is what zoomed in full screen 2 looks like. I recorded after the first run. The reason I bother showing off both options is that even though screen option 1 is convenient, it also isn't integer scaled. I'll keep this quick as to not lose half of you in a text spiel. Proper integer scaling resolution keeps all the pixels nice and equally sized. This is done with a uniform resolution raise that keeps the screen letterbox. This game was made for a 4:3 aspect ratio, I'd imagine just like the rest of the classic games, so when it's stretched to fill the screen, it runs the risk of the pixels not being multiplied uniformly, some things then being stretched or compressed. You can see it here with the health bar. Each unit is equal in size, and here they're not. Knowing this, I still chose to play on option 1. I don't really care about this personally, it doesn't bother me. The reason I chose to bring it up is because it does bother other people, I realize, and because this issue actually shows up in Capcom's official collections. You can see it in Legacy Collection 2, in the X Legacy Collections, and in the Zero ZX Collection. The fact that this issue seeps into formally backed fan projects is hilarious to me. Although, once again, I know some people really do care about this, so if you want the sharpest visuals possible, full screen 2 is your pick. I personally think the game looks great as is. For NES style Mega Man, this is some of the best we've gotten. The presentation in general meshes the two series together really well. We get some iconic Street Fighter locations in the Mega Man style. We get to fully explore the castle on the back of Ryu's stage, and Dhalsim's level is also visually unique, taking detailed cues from the original as do the rest. These are all some of the most distinct looking levels in the series that all have a different life and energy to them. Sometimes it feels like the visual style is a bit too varied to the point where they don't always look like they belong in the same game together. The backgrounds, for instance, don't always look consistently great. Some are so well detailed that's insane, but others are only moderately colored, barely being above the first game at its worst. The highs make up for the lows if you ask me. This game can look pretty stunning at times. The foregrounds in particular are consistently well done. Sometimes something as simple as ladders are given unique looks, and you're always able to tell what they are because their first instance is isolated, making it clear what it's supposed to be. In general, I just love the sprite work on everything, especially the characters themselves. They have great animations for their moves and the particle effects are well made. The enemy and projectile designs are really interesting if anything, like these fool signs in Rose's stage. These guys in Blanca's stage, they're not beating the allegations. I don't know allegations, but they're not beating them. There are also some large-scale Mega Man sprites and some cool visual flourishes, like the Versus screen and the weapon demos being in Training Room against Stan. Doesn't feel like it inherits too many visual limitations from the NES, it's all very well done for the style. A lot of my visual praise carries over to the soundtrack, and honestly I think I feel more positively about the music overall. I love 8-bit Mega Man music, and arranging Street Fighter songs into it is great. I think Street Fighter music is underrated in the grand scheme of gaming music. I mean, Guile theme's iconic, but I don't even think it's the best song from that game. So getting these high energy 8-bit arrangements of not only my preferred songs... I don't know if the mic's picking up the dogs barking outside my room right now. So getting these high energy 8-bit arrangements from not only my preferred songs, but also ones I haven't heard yet are great. Of course, the most defining thing about this game is the gameplay. Going into it was so great having a new classic Mega Man, and the feel is on point. The game controls just as tightly as any game post 3. 4 is probably the closest comparison because the slide here and the charge shot looks the same as that game, although without the clunk that accompanied it. That is to say, charge buffering always works. The shoulder buttons are also able to cycle through the weapons. The only real fumble I felt was with the ladders. They can't be grabbed at the edges in the same way like in the other games. For what was originally a fan game, the polish is mostly there, so instances like this don't bother me too much. Where everything really shines though is the level design. This is a great replication of what makes classic Mega Man so fun. The pacing is on point and some of the levels are fairly standard, while others introduce more elaborate gimmicks. The Ryu stage is probably the most traditional. It's still really great with alternate routes rewarding E-tanks and introduces more unique enemy types this game has. We get Sniper Joe type enemies who are only vulnerable while shooting, and these guys going back and forth. This game's enemies are more about finding windows of vulnerability and dodging until you get that punish window instead of dodging and firing back simultaneously. Then they start combining the enemies to make more compelling encounters. For the fighting game crossover, it makes sense to have a more combat-centric game than most of the other classics. Other stages introduce enemies that seem right out of a shoot-'em-up. In fact, Rose's stage has an exact shoot-'em-up section. It's also the only time Rush shows up in the game. You don't get him for utility items. In fact, there aren't any dedicated utility items at all. These types of enemies work even outside of this context because you get to choose to dodge and respond or try to counter their volley of shots. Instead of shots passing through each other, they tend to cancel each other out with the exception of high priority ones that tend to cancel out smaller shots entirely. Hold on to this, it will be important later. The rest of the stage has some tense enemy platforming combination and makes decent use of the enemies in different ways than before. Chun-Li's stage can get visually confusing and cluttered. Some objects aren't clear if they're solid or not, and the enemy spam on top of all the respawning and visuals do make this one the weaker stages. Although I do like some of the alternate routes they have and did have less trouble on the second playthrough. Dhalsim stage also has some problems, but it's kind of the opposite problem where it feels cramped at times. Has good platforming and ideas that just needed some room to breathe. It also had a troll room that reminded me of Star Tropics. I'd normally be annoyed by this, but come on, this is really funny. I managed to fall in on both playthroughs and died both times. I think Sea Viper probably had my favorite stage. It's based around lasers and using elevators to give you a new axis of control on how to move around the rows of Laser Joes. You have to run away from massive lasers and deal with some of the larger versions of the turrets from the first game. Very concentrated stage with a ton of variety. Actually, no, I think Blanca probably had my favorite stage. We have future cancellation victims and they combine super well with the falling spinners. I love the feel of dancing around all the falling hitboxes and responding to these plant lobbers, or while platforming all at once. It's some really good classic Mega Man design, also having some unintrusive underwater use. Great stage. Orlento's stage is short, sweet, and chaotic. It probably has the best platforming in the game, and some really good enemy placement to go with it. Finally, Urian's stage has some great visuals. The falling platforms make for tense timing obstacles to slide around, enemies have reflectors to make you consider your approach, and it also introduces more fully climbable terrain that gives you more positional control and more interesting set of combat encounters. Really solid set of stages. No bad ones, and some really interesting ideas on how to expand upon the Mega Man gameplay. It usually does a good job of introducing gimmicks and finding new ways to escalate them with different challenges within the stages. It's also one of the better games in the series at balancing the difficulty. In most games in the series, there are a couple stages and bosses that are really inapproachable early on. This game isn't really that hard to me, but then again, classic Mega Man styled action platformers are one of the few styles of game I'd consider myself good at. I have a lot of experience with this type of game, and that said, this was still a fun challenge, especially towards the end of the game. That said, I feel any of these stages could reasonably be done first. Part of this is owed to the boss design, which I'll get to, but there are other elements helping this. E-tanks aren't really common commodity in this one, and don't respawn upon getting a game over, so you really don't have that many throughout all of the initial 8. They really only are if you almost die to a boss. I never needed them mid-stage. All these stages have a really good difficulty to length ratio. The hardest ones are usually the shortest, or if not, have well-placed checkpoints to ensure you don't get knocked back too far. I also feel this is one of the fairest games in the series. There are a lot of deliberate choices done to make this a very well-designed and balanced game. Minimal knockback issues, fun to fight enemies, and challenging yet manageable level design. Enhancing these great stages, of course, are great special weapons. These are surprisingly good. Better than 7 and maybe 4 in this category. The special weapons, of course, are that respective character's special moves. For instance, Ryuga's Hadouken. It actually functions like an upgraded buster, being chargeable. I didn't get too much use out of this because when I tried to solidify a route during the second playthrough, I did Dhalsim first, where Ryu is right near the end of the game. I do think Ryu first would be easy to do, but then you also have to do Sea Viper third, which is decidedly not easy. But hey, maybe it's worth trying in a future run, because this thing still is pretty darn good. Rolento gives a Minesweeper, which I didn't like on the first run, but it works a lot better as a panic button for me, especially when climbing on the fence. It's great against the enemies with reflectors. Rose awakens my shield bias for the first time on this channel. It's kind of a mix of water shield from 10 and acid shield from 11. It rotates leaving blind spots, but is also very powerful and allows you to fire a powerful shot during it. One of my favorites for sure. The blind spots were annoying, but the coverage overall was really helpful. Aegis Reflector from Urien can act as a frontal shield or a reflector. This one's alright, it's quite good at what it does, but compared to its Street Fighter appearance, it's surprisingly non-versatile. Blanka gives you a watermelon, conversely the most versatile weapon. It drops in front of you and you can kick it at enemies, roll it around to hit grounded enemies, or jump on it to get to higher areas. I feel like a fully realized version of the Mega Ball from 8. It does a lot of stuff and is really good at it. Chun-Li's lightning kick can also hit grounded opponents, but the coverage is really small. Either this thing needed a much larger hitbox or needed to do way more damage because you need to get super close only to get hit back because it's so small. It works more as a persistent spammable hitbox against shielded enemies though, and it does have a lot of ammo, so it can be used like this. It's just one of the weaker ones. I mean, as a persistent hitbox, Yoga Inferno works way better anyways. It lasts forever, is aimable, and is a powerful multi-hit. This weapon is the reason that on my second run I did Dhalsim first. The coverage is amazing and it makes a lot of stages so much more manageable. Competing with it for the best weapon in the game is Optic Laser from Sea Viper. It's fast, high damage, and transcendent priority on other projectiles. If it had more ammo, then it would be one of the most easily spammable weapons in the series. It's not like ammo drops are uncommon, they're balanced reasonably well along with health drops, but this would easily be the best weapon in the game if it had just a bit more to work with. One thing I found interesting about the weapons is that I paid more attention than ever to what weapons were good against not just what bosses, but also the enemies. Enemies are really tanky in this game. It feels like charge shots are way more powerful than just 3 lemons. Using the right weapon more than ever can make the difference between pouring a crap ton of shots into one tough guy and deleting them in 1 or 2 hits and moving on. Also, the weapons don't go away when you swap them. Being combined with being able to cycle through them, I feel would open up some really fast paced and technical weapon use. I mean, have you seen 10 and 11 speedruns? They go crazy with the weapon use, and I feel like this game has that kind of potential in it. I don't even care too much about weapon ammo because it's probably going to be one of the few games where I'd legitimately rather fight bosses without the weaknesses. Not because the weaknesses are unbalanced against the fights, most really aren't. It's because these bosses are super well designed to the point that fighting them buster only is probably more fun. These are the best fights in the classic series easily. The fighters use their respective special moves, all properties included. You have to pay attention to invincible moves, DPs, punish windows, and projectile strength. Again, projectiles counter each other based on priority, so you can get some of that sweet Street Fighter neutral. It's just like the real thing. Ryu really is just spamming Hadouken half the match, has an invincible Tatsumatsu to worry about, and they all even have light, medium, and heavy variants to watch out for. You may also notice that second meter next to the health. That's a super meter. Compete with a dramatic zoom in and MS Paint background if you die to it. They add more depth to the battle as another thing to watch out for, and they fill faster when using the weaknesses. Blanka in particular gets decimated by his weakness and getting looped into his own super. Otherwise, it's a very complex fight. Rolento and Urien have chaotic fights that take a lot of concentration to keep up with. Dhalsim takes a keen mix of proactive and defensive dodging and countering, although for some reason he usually aims his super backwards, letting you easily whiff punish his raw level 3 and make a viral Evo clip out of him. Otherwise, it's a really fun opening fight. Sea Viper is incredibly hard and is built around a low range of the lightning kick. The chaotic hopping around is tough to keep up with while staying in range. Chun-Li is easy because just like in Street Fighter 2, the spinning kick gives her a free entry into disadvantage state. Because of this, I was not only enjoying, but actually turbo invested in a boss rush. Again, E-tanks aren't common and don't respawn, so on my first run where I didn't know that nor the weakness chain, it took me over half an hour to finish. I also didn't realize that this thing dropped health between the fights though. I had to concentrate on patterns and execution to basically perfect these fights. Honestly, I did have to grind lives, but this is the best grinding I've ever experienced in any game. It's a pretty wild experience that I honestly really enjoyed. Anyways, I guess it's time to go curb stomp whatever Bison's doing right now. I would have liked it if the level select was a world of the map like this, but it's still pretty cool to have it here. Balrog gets a very chaotic stage with so much going on, instant death chasing you, enemies everywhere. It's honestly fun for how chaotic it was. If you weren't anticipating the next stage already, you will certainly get it after hearing the panic attack music. I don't feel safe here. For those who don't know, in both Super Street Fighter 2 and Super Turbo, Vega is by far the best tournament legal character and one of the most brutal top tiers in the series history. This stage seems to know this and makes a very difficult stage and boss for him. It's largely a vertical climb where it's easy to fall and start over, and then they give you a bunch of free gifts in the end. They know you don't want to redo that. Unfortunately, that's still a realistic risk, because they kept everything that made Vega so good to begin with. He's fast, has invincible flips, is invincible on the wall, can jump to it whenever, has a crazy mix-up game, and has a disjointless high damage output. You can use Lightning Kick to knock off his claw and mask, but it's even hard to hit him with it since he's darting around off the wall so frequently. In the weapon cycle, Kick is right next to the Buster, so you can swap between the two for the most consistent damage output quickly, although it's still brutal. You don't actually fight Sagat next. The next stage is a boss rush and then straight to Bison. Sagat wasn't even in the game until an update added him. To fight him, you gotta do some classic arcade cryptic difficult bullcrap. I was hoping the game would have something like this. You have to beat at least 4 of the bosses with a perfect during the boss rush, and then you can fight him before Bison. Not that I could do that even if I knew it was in the game before recording. You can also unlock a fight against Akuma if you beat any 3 bosses before the boss rush with a perfect. I'd say that Sagat would probably be the harder fight to unlock. If it were up to me, Sagat would be for beating Balrog and Vega with perfect, and Akuma for beating the game without getting a game over. That would make them more unique to me. Either way, it's time to fight Bison himself. Amazing final boss that captures why this guy is to be feared. His range, speed, and mix-ups combined with his huge super that he starts the battle with makes for a super hard but super satisfying battle to learn. This also took me a while on my first run, but it led to a satisfying takedown and a cut down on time on the second run, which overall, about an hour shorter. Once you take Bison down, Mega Man and Ryu walk home and the credits roll. I went into Street Fighter Cross Mega Man expecting a pretty good game. I got more than that. I got something that can actually stand up against the rest of the series in terms of its quality design. Honestly, I'd say this game is about on par with 7 and 8 in terms of sheer quality. It has everything I want out of a Mega Man game, and even does some unique things with its combat. This was a great time, and it cost nothing. To download, again, just go to the link in the description or to Capcom's website, and then you can get right to playing it. And if you're a Mega Man fan or even just an action platformer fan, then I'd say you owe it to yourself to do so. I give Street Fighter Cross Mega Man an 8 out of 10. Small unscripted post-review update. I already gave a little overview in the community post, but some plans have changed. I accidentally did a little bit of a slip, and now all of my game consoles are wrapped up in bubble wrap and are being placed into bins. I have no clue how this happened, but because of that, I unfortunately will not be able to play Devil May Cry 2. I know that's very tragic. In all seriousness, once everything gets settled, Uncharted is the next priority, and then Devil May Cry 2 after that. While everything's just passing, I do have some smaller things that I think I'll be able to get in. This one being one of them that I added to my schedule on a whim, and I also have another Mega Man related video coming soon, hopefully, so thank you for bearing with me. Have a good day.